Today on India Diary, we talk about a timeless and a universal message which is all-encompassing in its expression of truth. Yes, it's known as the Song of the Spirit, the divine communion between the Creator and, of course, His man. The teachings of Spirit through the soul that should be sung unceasingly. Of course, this text does not clearly distinguish history from symbology. Rather, it's often an intermix, yes, of the two, of tradition and spiritual revelation, which is very difficult for a common man to understand. And as far as I was concerned, for me, I thought that this particular text was written by a relative of mine. To be precise, my grand aunt. That's right. And I'm talking about the two books that everybody in India know about, the epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. And the one person that I always thought of, and I thought was the author of these books, would be Bapsima to me, but otherwise in the intellectual and spiritual world, she is known as Kamla Subramaniam. Of course, she's moved on to another place and another time and left the legacies of these great books. However, I've always been extremely scared of opening them because suppose I don't understand. And when you throw your insecurities and fears open to the universe, they throw back the answers to you. And my answer came to me when I got a book called the Gita for Children by Roopa Pai. It was given to me to give to my mother by a friend of mine called Uthup, who is a transplant patient. And I read the book and I thought, wow, it is so simple. Anybody can understand it. Yes, you and me, we can understand it because it actually talks about how the Gita can be applied to our day-to-day living. Time went on, that book found itself from the side of my table into a dusty bookshelf. And few years later, I get a forward of a TEDx talk. And there's this woman talking again about the Gita and how you can use it to solve everything in your life, from diets to accounts to praying to God to everything. And I'm like, why does this sound so familiar? Then there was a scurry to that little cabinet and I found that book. Oh my God, it was the same person. So today on India Diary, we have with us the woman who's made all our lives so much simpler and made us realize you really don't have to be that high up in the spiritual or intellectual world to understand this basic text, which reveals to you in its simplest form how you can take yourself a little upward and a little forward, and of course, find out the truths that exist in this universe. Roopa Pai, the author of the Gita for Children. From being a computer engineer to a housewife who traveled the world with her husband, literally to Delhi, Bombay, London, and not necessarily in that order, I have with me today somebody who believed she always would be a writer, unraveling the mysteries of the world, and obviously she could because she has a sum equal to everything, right? Please welcome with me Roopa Pai. Hi Roopa.
Hi Anjali, thank you so much for having me. Delighted to be here on the inaugural podcast of India Diary.
Absolutely, thank you for reminding me about that. Yes, totally, the inaugural podcast. And the reason Roopa is here is because actually I got a gift that I had to give to my mother, but I don't think it ever reached her, and it was called the Gita for Children. And I was so amazed that I've always thought that big books like this would be so, difficult to fathom, and how does one go about understanding these mysteries and the formula and the karma and the dharma syndrome, and how do you actually move on with it? And there was your book, which was so simple. And then few years later, a friend of mine called me from America and said, have you heard this TEDx talk? It's by Roopa and she's fantastic with the way she just talks about the Gita. And I see the entire TEDx talk and I'm like, why does Roopa Pai sound so familiar? And then I go back and get my book out and say, these are the reasons.
Ah, okay.
So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So why computer engineering and writing and then the Gita?
Okay. So writing has always been a part of my life. It was a very natural urge. I started writing just to express myself and to record impressions of travels that we went on as a family. So it was a very natural outpouring for me, and I did it often. I never journaled in that sense. I didn't keep a diary or anything, as people say you should if you want to be a writer. I didn't do that, but I used to just always express myself through writing, and I think I was one of the lucky ones who knew when I was very young that what I wanted to be when I grew up was a writer.
Oh wow, okay.
And that actually didn't change through my entire life, what I wanted to be. What I did do, however, was go away and do engineering.
Yeah, so how did the engineering happen?
Just by virtue of being a South Indian middle class girl whose parents said, or growing up in the 80s, whose parents said that, sorry, if you don't do medicine or engineering, you're going to end up on the dung heap. So, so you have to do. And
I'm also a South Indian middle class girl growing up in the 80s, but my parents knew from the start that medicine or engineering was not my cup of tea because I hardly passed in math.
So my problem was that I also did well academically.
Well, yeah, that's a problem.
I mean, a good problem, but it's still a problem. So I went away and did engineering. And the moment I finished it, I said, okay, I'm going off to do writing for children. And that's an interesting story. I don't know if we have the time for it, but I'll tell you in brief.
Yeah.
That when I was growing up, I read a lot of Enid Blyton.
Oh yes, like we all did.
Like we all did. And she was the light of my childhood. I mean, she completely lit up my childhood. It was beautiful. And luckily for all of us, she wrote over 700 books. So we never ran out of Enid Blyton books to read.
That's true, never. And we always had some great imagery to live with.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
So she was on one side and Ammatsitra Katha on the other.
Thank God for both.
Yeah. So that was nicely balanced. And somewhere in the middle, there were these Russian books. The USSR used to give us a lot of Russian books, which were very cheap and beautifully produced and illustrated. So these three formed the bedrock of my reading in childhood.
Wow.
And but the problem was that Ammatsitra Katha's characters were all in some historical age, mythological age, and Enid Blyton's characters were very real and present and current. And to me, as an Indian child, it seemed as if only British children had the best childhoods.
That's true.
They had such cool childhoods. There were never any adults around in their lives.
Yeah, I don't know where they were.
And we had parents, uncles, aunts, grandparents at every picnic, like
huge family that just kept on becoming
bigger. And we all piled into ambassador cars and went on picnics. And we never had all the exciting food that Enid Blyton kids had. We just had lemon rice and curd rice at our picnics.
So yum.
Yeah, I know. But at that time, it seemed to me like it was very uncool, you know.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, but when I was about 13, I got exposed for the first time to a magazine called Target. I don't know if you've read Target. And something just exploded in my mind because this talked about Indian children like me in my situation, urban Indian kids who went to English medium schools. But they seemed to be all having a good time.
Yeah.
Just because of how it was positioned.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, oh, actually, being an Indian kid is pretty darn cool. I mean, the fact that we have so much family around us all the time is a great thing. The fact that we have lemon rice means that somebody woke up in the morning and cooked it for us. And we didn't have to eat out of tins like the Enid Blyton kids.
We did, yeah.
So, whatever. That was a total perspective shift in my head. And I became convinced that not only would I grow up and write stories, I would write Indian stories for Indian children.
Yes.
And I would work for Target. So that became my
target
of my entire life. So actually finished engineering, moved to Delhi and went straight to the Target office and said, listen, I need a job.
Oh my God. And did you get it?
And that is when perhaps I started believing in destiny, but only in hindsight, not then. But can you imagine the day I walked into the Target office, it was a tiny office with a very small staff, 3 editorial staff. And the week before I walked in, one of them had quit.
My God. So if the stars were not lining up for you, then I don't know.
Was a position open. And then they said, you have to go back to Bangalore, write for us, we'll see. We're getting many applicants. But I said, listen, I'm moving back to Delhi in a month. So, if I get the position. And I got it. And here's what happened. So this editor, who was my editor in Target, so I was there for just a couple of years. Then I moved off to London with my husband. He had to go on work and we just moved. And then we kept moving around the world. But 10 years later, I hadn't even been in touch with her. 10 years later, she called out of the blue, said, hey, I read one of your stories in a children's magazine. And I really liked that style. And I've just taken over as publishing director at Hachette India, children's books. And I'd like you to write for me. So I was like, okay, sure. And then I wrote this series called Tara Knots.
Yes.
Which is like India's first fantasy adventure series for children, original.
Unbelievable.
In English. So we did that. It was very much had an underpinning of Indian mythology. But on the surface, if you're a child reading it, you won't guess. it all sounds very exotic because it's set in a parallel universe called Mithya.
Yeah.
But if you are an adult reading it, you'll say, aha, aha, aha,
Yeah,
and the
you'll
pennies
know
will
those-
keep dropping. And that's what she means, that's what she means.
So do you know that inadvertently you actually lay the ground rules for a lot of textbooks that have been going to children? So we learnt, of course, I think it's very important to have those kind of books in our lives, like Shakespeare and the romantic poets and what have you. But nowadays children actually read stories and their literature about people like Ram and Gopal and Vandana and Kavita, and the first reaction to me is like, you're reading literature and writing an English exam about what happened in Behrampur? I'm like, get real, because we grew up knowing what was happening in Sussex,
right,
and on the chalk cliffs of Dover. So, and then I always used to think, I thought I was very lucky because my friends used to always say, you've got a middle name like Elizabeth. So somehow I felt I was very attached to the famous five and the secret seven and things like that. But obviously, while I'm hearing you talk, your bent of mind was always philosophical. Yeah. Because otherwise you wouldn't say that you were as a child knowing exactly what you wanted and then you went there and got exactly that. And I suppose you started looking at things positively also. Yeah. Now, when you look at a glass half full, then half empty, automatically I feel the stars and the universe starts lining up for you.
But it was a natural thing. I didn't work towards it.
No, it was not pre-planned, but it was a clear-cut thought without doubt.
Yeah.
And I think that doubt, which is called Shanka, is the basic
of all misery.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, doubt is also the seed of all development also.
Yeah, I suppose that's skeptical mind. But to doubt everything, it's like
to
if you get
guess yourself.
That is, I think, the biggest fault that we have. And maybe that is what makes many of us attracted to Arjuna. Because he is always second guessing himself.
Yeah, totally.
He's always caught between karma and dharma. I still remember going to a psychiatrist, Dr. Philip John, when I was in Cochin, and I was talking to him, and he put me down in exactly 17 seconds. Sometimes you need your mind to get service, so I decided I'm going to do some servicing of my mind. And the first thing he said is, Anjali, you remind me of Arjuna. Because you know what you're going to do, you know you want to do it, but you're always worried about the repercussions. And in the kind of family I grew up, where one of my granddads actually, translated the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, Mrs. Kamla Subramaniam, you really thought that, it was just part of your being. And then to really think that, God, this could be applied to daily life was something at one point absolutely scandalous. Anjali being compared to Arjuna, I mean, and then your book happened to me. So why did you choose such a difficult topic like the Gita? Secondly, why did you choose to write the Gita for children? And thirdly, did you really believe that an adult would read that book and suddenly say, Eureka, I figured it out?
Okay, so I'll start with your first question. Why did you choose to write the Gita? That's how you phrased it. Actually, I didn't choose. The Gita chose me. It really happened like that.
God, I'm getting goosebumps now.
I mean, now I feel that way because I grew up in a family that did not have a single copy of the Gita. We did not grow up revering the Gita at all. Okay, so, I mean, it was just...
You know that everyone in your family is going to be hearing this,
yes,
right?
Yes. No, we belong to a Protestant cult among Hindus who don't believe in the Vedas and Sanskrit and all that. So we have our own...
so you are a breakaway rebel because you're writing exactly about those things. The Upanishads, the Vedas and the Gita. All right.
So what happened was, once I'd finished the Taranauts books, I said, I'm totally fictioned out. I have no more creative juice in me. I need to write something else. And so I went back and leveraged my engineering education to write a book on popular science for children called What If the Earth Stopped Spinning and 24 Other Mysteries of Science.
How lovely.
And then once again, I was at a loss. Once I'd finished that, I was like, now what? And my editor, the same one, Vatsala Kaul, who made me write the Taranauts, she called and she said, hey, I have another idea for you for a book. And I said, okay, great, because I have no ideas, so please tell me. And she said, why don't you write the Gita for children? And I was like, say what? The Gita for children? I mean, first of all...
And you've never read it?
I have never read it, except the Amrita Katha version of it. which was my least favorite Amarsikatha because it had a tremendously large speech bubbles.
Yes, that's true. And extremely, very difficult to read and concentrate because there's constantly something happening in the same kuti film.
Yeah. So I said, no, not me. You've picked, this is somewhere you've gone completely wrong. People are steeped in the Gita. They study it for years and they tell me it's so layered. There are so many nuances that they could spend a lifetime studying it. What gives me the right, as a person who has never read it, the right to not only retell it, but retell it for the benefit of young, impressionable minds. Surely I'm not qualified to do this. Then Vatsala said to me, hey, no, I'd like you to take a chance at it, take a crack at it. And I just want you to do it because I think you have a knack for interpreting or simplifying complex concepts in a way that children can access it and appreciate it and enjoy it. So I said, well, I resisted staunchly for 6 months. I said, no, absolutely not. I don't even think it's meant for children. Why are we doing the Gita for children? She said, well, there isn't one in the market, a good one which is not from a religious organization.
So you're telling me you're the first one to write?
No. I don't think so. But there are several others. But usually they are from a religious kind of organization.
Yeah, it's not like a neutral ground.
Not a neutral ground. Like we couldn't find at that time. Not many were there. So she said, no, please, I throw you a challenge. Take 1 month. I mean, seriously read the original. And if at the end of it, you tell me that there's absolutely nothing in it to recommend it to children, I will let you be. It's fine. Because she says, even I don't know enough about it to say it is meant for children. I want you to explore it. So I went away to an aunt of my husband's actually, who was quite steeped in it, and I asked her to sort of give me some kind of background to it. And she's a teacher, so she rolled out a chart paper and she drew me a mind map, first chapter, what happened, second chapter.
Wow.
Things like that. And we were supposed to have many sessions like this. But at the very first session, she said, and you know that Krishna and Arjuna are best friends. And I hadn't known that.
Okay.
And always thought of Krishna as a mentor, a god, somebody superior to Arjuna. I hadn't thought of them as like
equals,
buddies.
As buddies, yeah.
As buddies. So as soon as she said that, I think something clicked. I said, oh, it's a conversation between two best friends. I think I can do that.
Yes,
I can totally talk about that. I can relate that. So I said, okay, that gives me the courage to at least try it. And she gave me some of her favorite commentary. She said, go away and we'll come back in like a week, 10 days and we'll go on to the next chapter or whatever. And I started reading. Actually, what I started with was Radhakrishnan, our president, Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan's Bhagavad Gita, and Christopher Isherwood's Bhagavad Gita. And so I began to read both. And by the end of the month, when Vatsala called me back and said, hey, so is it happening or not, do you think? I said, but of course it's happening.
Okay.
So there was like a 180-degree change. And I said, man, it's the most... I am captivated by this book, and I think not only me, but every child should know it. I think what I see it as the oldest self-help book in the world.
Yes.
It's not about the afterlife at all. It's about this life, how to live it.
Everything is here.
Everything is here, and how to negotiate this samsara, the wild, stormy waters of samsara. It's not going to be easy, but with this by your side, maybe it's not so hard. It's just a shift in your mind, because the universe only exists in our own minds.
That's true.
Things like that. And I don't know, I just felt it validated so many things that I had probably felt myself at a subconscious level, but nobody had told me, like, yes, this is how it is. But I had only suspected at it, and again, was second guessing. I'm not sure. Perhaps it's just a point of view. But when it says it so clearly, lucidly, and says this is it, and the resonating was too much. I was like, my God, this is true.
You can actually see yourself in nearly every situation.
And I said, this is a great book. I don't know why there is so many conflicted feelings about it, but I just felt, and it's totally non-religious. I would say it's a very secular self-help book for anyone, for humanity. It's a gift to us.
It truly is. Because I keep thinking, when I decided that, okay, I'm going to do a podcast, I'm going to call it India Diary, then your TEDx talk happened, and this book happened, of course, before that. And I was again really scared because the Gita is a very vast subject, and coming from a Tambram family like I do, I can't just be going out there and talking casually about it. But after seeing your TEDx talk, I realized that actually it is, as you said, the world's best self-help guide book.
Yeah.
And if I need to talk about that, I really don't need to be worried, because the first thing the Gita tells you is to be confident with who you are and your actions, right?
Absolutely.
And then I read your book, and I reread your book, and then I listened to your TEDx talks even more. And I was like, my God, this is so cool. She's just dealing with it. It's the best weight loss way, the best nutrition guide, the best way to fight with somebody, the best way to reconcile with yourself.
Yeah.
And you put it so easily that suddenly I felt I was like a saint or a seer, because that knowledge had penetrated me on my level, not on some doctorate level.
Yeah.
So what changed you while you were writing the Gita? Was there anything that just changed forever because of it? What were your favorite verses from the Gita?
Doing the book, reading the Gita for the first time, transformative for me on so many levels.
How many times did you have to read it?
Not so many times as, absorb each verse and its many interpretations.
So you only read it in English, right?
Yeah.
Like all of us.
Yes. And because I'm a Kannadiga, I've never studied Sanskrit, but Kannada is pretty Sanskritized. So you get some of the sense of it. So I used to try to read the original passage also, the original shloka, and then,
So you get that
feel
to it.
Yeah, so there's some texture to it then. Otherwise it just becomes a very English text. So, I think what are my favorite verses? I think that whole second chapter one, which says Karmane Vadikaraste Ma Phaleshu Kadachana. I mean,
which means
all you can do, all you should do is do your duty. Just do your duty and do not expect any with no expectations.
Yes.
So focus 100% on your effort and 0% on expectations for many reasons.
Just do your duty.
Yeah, because the 2-3 things. One thing is that what you can control is your effort. You cannot control the outcome.
Exactly.
So why waste time, space, energy and emotion on something that you cannot control? Instead, put all your focus on something you can control. The other thing is, the moment you start thinking of the outcome, you are distracted from your effort.
That's right. So that's
then
the whole
it's not 100%
conflicting
effort.
nature and juxtaposing nature of karma and dharma anyway.
Yeah.
It's all within us.
Yeah. So just focus on doing what is right. And what is right? That is the beautiful thing about the Indian texts, is that they leave that also open to interpretation. So instead of just saying, these are the 10 rules that you have to follow, the Gita, the Upanishads, the Vedas, they all leave it's very open-ended. What do you think is right action in this circumstance?
Exactly.
So every action has to be mindful, therefore. You can't say, but the rule said that I should not do this, so I won't do it. You cannot, there are no easy ways out in the Indian texts. Every time you have to weigh the options, see all the different possible routes, and then based on the circumstance, based on your dharma, you have to take a stand.
Actually, the Gita, if you look at it, is pretty mathematical.
In some sense, sure.
Because you know that, it's 2 plus 2 will equal 4.
Yeah.
And you know that the answer has to be 4. But your circumstance would take you through 100 minus 96 as well.
Yeah, true.
So to put the prefix, which is perfect.
Yeah.
And you know what the outcome is, but not to expect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel that even though we are, feel convicted and we feel Arjun, as I say Arjun, totally, I also feel that Krishna is also our own voice.
Of course. The whole Kurukshetra is not a faraway field in Haryana.
It's in your own head.
Yeah, it's all exists in your own head, in your own heart. And the Pandavas live within you, and so do the Kauravas. And there are always 11 Akshahinis, battalions of the Kauravas, and only 7 of the Pandavas.
Yes.
So there's always enough reasons and enough voices inside you asking you to do what's convenient, what's cool, and not to pick something that's difficult even though it's right. So really what you need to do is Arjun Bano. At that moment of deep conflict, moral conflict, what you need to do is not care about the Pandavas and the Kauravas. Ask them both to pipe down
in yourself.
In yourself.
And Arjun
Just like
bano
Arjun
mein-
did.
And Arjun bano mane?
Means, what did Arjuna do? He didn't care that everybody of both sides was looking at him in the middle of the battlefield, right in the center of both the armies, where everyone could see him. He had his nervous breakdown. And he didn't say, I know these are my choices. Either I stand up and fight and think about the outcome later, because this is my, if I do this, I know I can possibly help my side win. And then people will sing my praises. Generations later, I will be celebrated.
Yes.
Arjuna Dayati Maharathi. Everybody will sing my praises. The other choice is to now not do what I came here to do.
That was
and
to
then
fight
risk,
the battle.
Yeah, and then risk everybody calling me traitor, coward, wimp, and betrayer. Like, so many epithets I'm going to get, and people are not going to be pleased with me at all. And when the choice is between these two extremes, most of us would just go ahead and do it.
Yeah, just finish it
Finish
off.
it off, then we can think about the circumstances later. I mean, the fallout of it later. What made Arjuna great was that he didn't do that.
Actually, we're not failing. We're trying to just reason.
Yeah.
And most of us give up because
Yeah.
we're too scared, because the Kurukshetra was dominated by the Kauravas. So there are more people out there who are ready to...
more than giving up, I think we pick the choice that is easier, convenient for the circumstance. I mean, I'm not going to make a big fuss. I'm just going to go with it now.
No, but I don't think he was making a fuss, right? His breakdown was he exposed his core and his weakness to everybody.
That's what he didn't care about what they thought of him.
But how difficult would it have been for a man to accept that, hey, I am going through this? It's like modern age people saying that they're going through depression.
Yeah.
But they're probably depressed because their maid didn't come or the towel was not folded properly. You know what I mean? It's not about really deep-seated emotional and ethical issues, which are something that I feel... So I'm just thinking, I'm empathizing with Arjuna, thinking that, oh my God, how did he do that?
And stay tuned to India Diary, because when we come back, Roopa Pai is going to tell us a lot more about her journey as a writer and how the Gita happened to her. And now to thank our title sponsor, the Rivoli Group. We would also like to thank our venue and hospitality partners, Taj MG Road, Bangalore. And we also have to say special thank yous to people like Prabhat Verma and Manoj Matthew of the Taj Group of Hotels that made this so possible. Funky Rainbow, thank you for keeping Roopa Pai's books. You can contact us at indiadiary22@gmail.com. Stay tuned for the rest of the episode, because details of the author, where you can find her on Instagram and Facebook, how you can get in touch with everyone who's associated with this production, will be there for you. We support Sunny Foundation that brightens the lives of transplant and dialysis patients. Now, it's back to Roopa Pai and me on India Diary.
And what a great role did Krishna play to pull him out of that.
Yeah, so what he did was, he said, I'm not going for easy options here. If it's going to take me some time to work this out, I'm going to take that time. I'm not going to succumb and do something just because, I don't care if the sun comes up, if everybody is watching. My body language, what does it convey to my enemies? What does it convey to my side?
Yeah,
I'm not, because I have to work this out. It's a dilemma, and I will not go forward. I will not rush into mindless action. I will think about it first. And what did he do? He put his bow down and he put his entire problem in Krishna's hands. And he said, now you tell me what to do. And that's exactly what I tell kids that they should do. Tell your Pandavas and Kauravas, one of them is saying, no, go do it, and the Pandavas saying, no, I don't think that's right. But tell both them to pipe down, because only when both of them are quiet will you hear the voice of Krishna. Yeah, so I tell kids that, suddenly if you're in the middle of a moral dilemma, like Arjun was, can you just suddenly say, okay, Krishna, now I need a solution, quick, speak up. What am I supposed to do? And do you think Krishna will start speaking to you? And they say, they're just looking at me and wondering. And I say, probably not, because you have to spend some time and energy and effort and love getting to know him first.
Yes.
Even to be able to trust your inner voice, you should have a great relationship with him. And I said, had Arjuna spent time getting to know his Krishna? And I say, yes, he had years of practice. They talked and talked all the time. They were BFFs. They hung out all the time.
BFFs, I like that.
They hung out so much that when he was in a real bind, Arjuna could just trust him so completely, Krishna. He said, boss, you tell me what to do. And I'll do it. So I tell kids that you have to spend time getting to know your Krishna, which means self-reflection. Every day at the end of the day, sit by yourselves for 10 minutes. Talk about all the moral dilemmas you faced that day. Talk about which option you chose and how that made you feel. That's all. There is no there is no right action and no wrong action, says the Gita.
True.
There are only actions and there are consequences. So you have to understand yourself by figuring out which consequence am I happier dealing with.
Absolutely.
That's all.
That's true. It's like another thing that I read, of course, and it was the book called The Secret, in which it's written that thoughts are things, that you can actually pick up your thought and remove it. Now, another thing that I was thinking about, and it was really frustrating me because I've been reading so many books on breathing and calming your mind and about meditation and how you can get the demons out and, you send them good wishes and good vibes and things like that. And I'm like, I am learning something that is part of my being, part of my tradition. All the roots of all this mindfulness started in our very own India. And today we are going out and reading books written by somebody else because we never really looked inward. And that's what I felt your book did. But don't you feel that all of us would feel a little cheated that you have written for children and we don't have a book like this in the adult section?
So I am a children's writer, so I was always going to write my books only for children, because I feel that is one space that I can occupy comfortably and I enjoy it. But one of my parents' friends who has known me since I was very little, when the book first came out, he thought to himself, he tells me, I was so scared. I said, what has this child gone and done? Surely she can't be writing the Gita for children. The Gita is not meant for children. And I think he was one of the first people to order it on Amazon as soon as it came out. And then he read it and then he called me and he said, oh my God, it's great. So I said, okay, so was it, you were worried about me doing it right? So he said, no, you know what, I read the Gita when he was going through a crisis, an emotional crisis. And he felt therefore that it spoke to him in that moment. He had just lost his wife and, he was going through a crisis of emotion. So he read it and it spoke to him and he said, that's the kind of person it is meant for. Surely it's not meant for children is what he thought. But he said the way you wrote it, it was a joyful text. I had not seen it that way. And that was because my mind was sad at that time. I could only see it one way.
Yeah.
But the way you put it, it is actually a joyful way to live. I had not thought of it that way. And I think, and a lot of people told me, why did you call it the Gita for children? It gets lost in the children's section. You should have just called it the Gita for dummies.
Yes, remember? Yes, I was talking to you about it as well.
And we could have read it. But this uncle said, no, the Gita for children is very aptly named because we are all children where the Gita is.
Lessons from the Gita, 11. Multi-thinking is a vital skill for a happy life. All you need is practice, practice and practice. And then you go on to saying you've heard of multitasking, the art of doing many things at the same time with equal focus. Women are supposed to be brilliant at it and men exact opposite. Now tell me something. You made it so simple that everyone can understand it. And I believe that multitasking is a great skill. And the Gita believed it too.
In a sense. I put it as multi-thinking.
Yes.
And I came up with that because...
But
Krishna,
everything starts with a thought.
Yeah, and Krishna says that, you have to be, if you are thinking of me, when this is during his Vishwarupa form, when he reveals himself to be the Paramatma, he says, if you're thinking of me, whatever a man is thinking of at the time of his death, that is what he'll be forced to repeat in the next life. But if you're thinking of me at the moment of your death, then you will come to me and you'll never need to live through a human life again. And Rajana says, oh, that's lovely. But when I don't know, I have no idea when I'm going to pop it. So how can I be sure that I will be thinking of you? And Krishna says, well, by thinking of me all the time. That's all. You just have to completely think of me all the time. And he says, what does that mean? He says, whatever you do, every breath you take, every action you make, every word you speak, offer it to me. Offer it to me.
No, so now the way you're talking and you're saying it, and of course it makes it so easy, like, your language, and it kind of makes me feel so much more comfortable because I was really scared about how to deal with such a heavy topic. But now what you have just said about, think of me at everything, this is the basis of every single religion of the world, isn't it?
Yeah. Here how he phrases it is, offer your work to me as a sacrifice.
Yeah, but
It's the great yagna.
But every religion has a yagna in it.
Of course, yeah. So
that you're doing your duty because you were called to do it.
Yeah.
No matter what your
well,
not even duty,
not in that sense, not like called to do it.
No, I mean in the sense like you're saying you're giving it up.
Yeah.
So even whatever text you read, it's about thinking of God and thinking of putting that action for Him, your thought process, whatever you're doing.
So that's one way to think of it, as giving it to God. But what he's actually meaning, he says in an earlier chapter, that just look at all the powers of the universe, the sun, the wind, the water, they offer themselves to you every moment of the day without expecting a thing in return.
Oh, I never thought of it.
Yeah,
like
without ever. So he says, this is the ancient cycle of give and take between gods and men. The gods are constantly giving, so should you.
So keeps
it's a
the
cycle. That
is
is how you will keep the cycle of virtue going. Just give it without saying, because I'm giving this, I need this in return. Don't corrupt that action by saying I need this in return, because the sun doesn't, the wind doesn't. They come up and do things.
That is just such a cool way of thinking of it.
So in that sense, give up your action means, renounce your action means, don't get attached to the fruits of that action.
Just do it.
Do it. Because in your mind, it must be done. Your dharma as a student is to study, or, that's all. I tell kids, so what is your dharma as a student? What's your duty? And they say, we have to study well, and we have to be obedient, and we have to do our homework. And I say, yes, that's true. Why do you have to study well? Say, because we should get good marks, get a good college, make our parents happy. And I say, Krishna says all of those are wrong reasons to study.
I hope my children are not watching this.
and they say, then they look really genuinely puzzled. They say, why should we study then? Saying, because it's your duty. That's all. As a student, your duty is to study, so study. If you say that I'm studying to come first in class, 2-3 things can happen. One thing, you may not come first in class. So you're setting yourself up for disappointment. The second thing is, if you say, I'm studying well because I want to come first in class, that means it's a toxic wish, because you're automatically wishing that everyone else who is studying just as hard as you or even more should come second, third and fourth.
Wow, that's deep. Okay.
So just focus on doing your duty. If as a result of studying your hardest, being your best version of yourself, if you also come first in class, that's great. But if you don't, then you have nothing to feel bad about. You don't blame yourself, because I did my very best. If it didn't happen, somebody must have been better, or there must have been some reason in the universe for it. So the good part is, when you don't take the responsibility on yourself for some outcome that you cannot control, you also don't take the blame.
Yes.
It frees you.
I agree.
Yeah.
I used to always say, I don't blame my failures on anybody. I always used to say that I won't make an excuse that I'm doing this and I'm doing that. Because if you give your failures to somebody, you have to give them your successes also.
As well.
So you just don't do that. And as I always say, like, you're making food, simple as cooking for your family.
Yeah.
If you cook every time you cook, if you're just going to cook so that your husband and your children and your lover and your friends jump and do cartwheels and say you're the world's best cook, you're really going to be sad if they say, how's the curry today? Okay. Yeah. Oh, you don't like it? Yeah. And immediately that happens. Yeah. But the more you do it just for the love of cooking and feeding people.
Yeah.
I mean, now that you have put it in this way, I understand the reasoning, but it's really deep, because at a given point, now it goes back to that what you said, each time it's different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so as a student, I have to do a duty. So what I do as a student, my action is different.
Oh, completely.
Later on, as a person working somewhere, what I'm doing is,
in a single day, we have so many different roles. And at each action, you have to weigh up, should my dharma be towards this role or that role at this moment? No, the thing is that you don't want karma to stick to you. That's the whole idea, right? Because if the karma sticks to you, then you'll probably have to come back to relive it.
Oh, okay.
That's the thinking. So if you don't want karma to stay in you, you should be detached from your karma. That's all. You should just do it in the spirit of sacrifice to the universe. Thank you, universe. Thank you, sun, for coming to work each day. I will also come to work each day.
Good. So obviously when you write a book like the Gita and you do research, it's definitely not run-of-the-mill. It's not like an assembly line production. There has to be a point of sublimation for you, which creates application. How much of the Gita have you applied to your daily life? How has it changed your family life quality? Do your children really believe that you have achieved something because of the Gita and been able to give it to them?
Well, my children, I don't think they've even read the book, but they've got a year full of it, of the philosophy, of the ideas in the Gita while I was writing the book, because I would be so excited at what I had discovered each day that when they came back from school, they would get a dose of it immediately. In fact, I think they began to say like, oh my God, there she goes again, that kind of reaction. But it's still gone into their heads, I think, I hope. In my own life, I think definitely I have consciously become less judgmental of other people.
Okay.
Because, one of the things that Krishna says is that, people are different. They're born with different natures. So everyone doesn't have to, there is no the truth. There is only your truth. And everybody's truth is different. So that kind of made a deeper impression on me. So now I say maybe that's his truth or her truth. And who am I to sit in judgment on their truth, right?
So then when you take that stance, then don't the world call you a diplomat?
Yeah, maybe, but I think it's a
It's about
threshold of
space.
spiritual growth to go beyond that to personal development, to say that everybody has a different point of view. And I think I read somewhere that the more you know, the less intense your opinions are about anything.
That's true, actually.
Yeah, so once you know a lot and you can see the truth from different perspectives, then you say, well, I can't say this is the truth anymore. This is just the truth as I see it. So I think in that sense it has impacted me a lot.
So use the word spirituality, though you said initially you come from a family which would probably have been Protestant. Right?
Yeah, but spirituality is beyond.
Yeah, no, so obviously that thought process has changed in you for having that spiritual light that came through the Gita.
No, but the Protestant was against the social hierarchies
Yes,
and the ritual and all that. I think, in fact, what our founder of our cult, Basava, what he says is essentially the deepest core of what the Upanishads say, what the Vedas say. It's the same thing, but these truths get muddied over time as they are reinterpreted and misinterpreted over and over again. So every few 100 years, somebody has to come up and say it again in the pure form.
Because it's
to
actually,
remind
as
people
you said, it's a guidebook for everyday living.
Yeah,
right? And you have to live and endorse that.
Yeah.
And of course, when you forget it, you need to get that
somebody
fine-tuning.
has to remind you again.
So, okay, I get the inspiration for this book and, that you hadn't read it. So you thought, okay, then you read it and you had that eureka moment. What were your stumbling blocks and did you face criticism?
Actually, I must say I didn't. I expected to have many more stumbling blocks, many more tough things that I had to wrestle with than I actually did. It was a joy. It was a complete joy from beginning to end. I did not have to wrestle with too many different conflicts within my mind. It seemed to speak directly to me. I sort of almost agreed with everything Krishna was saying. So that was really strange. But yeah, so not too many stumbling blocks. It was a pure joy to write it.
How wonderful.
Yeah, but what the other criticism I expected once again a lot more, because I said really I have 1 year of immersion in the Gita. I mean, seriously, it can't be enough. I'm sure people will find, because obviously again it's not, this is like everybody reads a text or watches a movie or
and
takes in their own way, depending on our own baggage from the past, our own life experiences. So we all see things in a different way. So it can't be that everybody agrees with my interpretation, because it's definitely my individual personal interpretation of the Gita. Surprisingly though, there's been very little. So I'm very humbled. I feel very blessed. I feel very grateful that somehow my interpretation seems to have found takers.
No, actually, I think the reason why, people have not maybe criticized it so much is because you have not tried to give it, try to be the person who wrote the Gita, or you've not tried to be Krishna. Mm-hmm. You've actually just laid it down as a layman. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many people interpreting the Gita would have Rudyard Kipling's poem If in it? Mm-hmm. And how many people would talk about multitasking, and how many people would put it down to basic things which is understood by normal people. Mm-hmm. And by normal people, I'm saying people who've just generally lost the time and space for this kind of spirituality. We have religiosity, if you can call it, that we need to go temple temple, mandir, mosque, masjid, all those kind of church, we need to do it. But I think spirituality comes from a different space. And this book kind of somewhere lights that spark again.
Thank you.
No, really, even for me. And I am a spiritual being in the sense, I'm always looking for a higher truth. I'm always trying to deal with my own demons, like all of us do.
Yeah, of course.
But this book made it, there are times I've laughed out loud and my children have actually said, Ma, you're laughing reading the Gita. I said, yeah, sweetheart. And that multitasking part, and, they turned around and said, why are you laughing? I said, well, you know what she says? You could be having a conversation with somebody on Skype and message somebody else on Facebook, and then you'll be watching TV and the list goes. I said, no, it's not written in the Gita. I said, yes, it is written in the Gita according to Roopa. So the thing is, it's lovely because it's really it's a reality which you've made even more real by applying it to our life. And little earlier you were talking to me and you were saying like how things are actually, you're living it the way it has been ordained in the Upanishads and the Vedas. And you've also been working on that book as well.
Yeah, it's just come out actually a couple of months ago. So, once I finished writing the Gita, and then I was, waiting in great trepidation to see how it would be received. It was received well. And then immediately my editor said, okay, I think it's time to do the Vedas. And I said, hey, wait.
Oh, God.
Just a minute, excuse me. This is just a one-off that I did and I really enjoyed it. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go down that path only. So I said, no, I want to do different things. So I went away and did a book on economics for children.
Oh God, even I need to read that one also. Yeah.
Because what the Gita did for me, apart from so many other wonderful things, writing the Gita for children gave me the confidence that if I wanted to find out something about something that I had no clue about, I could just go as a humble student and start, and it would open itself up to me. Yes. If I went with the right attitude and was willing to work for it, it will happen. So that confidence came. So I said, what is another subject that I don't know anything about, but I wish I did? So I said, okay, that's something I have never studied in high school or college. It's a good time. So I did that. Then I went away and I did another book called Ready, 99 Must-Have Skills for the World Conquering Teenager. That's a book on life skills for teenagers. It's inspired by the Scouts and Guides movement.
I think all parents, please, let's buy this for our children because we really need them to have not 99, let's be realistic, at least 5. Yes.
So, yeah, it was inspired by that, but I came up with 99 skills that I thought a 21st century Indian urban teenager would need. So then after all that, then I went away and wrote another book on Krishnadevaraya of Hampi, just because Hampi is one of my favorite destinations in the world.
So constantly writing books, I like this whole concept.
Then I said, but the pull was strong because I knew that the Vedas and Upanishads were the prequel to the Gita.
Yeah.
The Gita is the condensation of all the wisdoms of the Upanishads. So I said, I've had a good enough time in the fragrant garden on the outskirts of the forest, which is called the Gita. But now it's time to enter the forest, and explore.
Wow.
So I said, let's go see what the Vedas and Upanishads are about. And I started researching that. And again, it was a hugely uplifting, hugely joyful experience, much more complicated than the Gita. Because the outpourings are very mystical, very ecstatic. And this is a very condensed version, right? The Gita. So that's the interesting part. So Upanishads were there written well before the Gita. And the Vedas well before. But some smart person, our sages were so smart, they said, if we leave the Upanishads like this, they're great wisdoms. But how do we get it to the common man? Nobody's going to read all this and understand anything out of it. You have to be a certain level of spiritual development. You have to be a scholar of Sanskrit to be able to understand. So how do we get it out to the common people? So they said, first of all, condense it, make it 700 verses, the Gita. Then what do? How do you make sure they swallow this pill of philosophy? Went to Mary Poppins and said, spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
Trust you to bring Mary Poppins between the Upanishads and the
Vedavyasa or whoever that was, said, let's create this fabulous epic called the Mahabharata. Let's populate it with fantastic characters and situations. Let's get people attached to characters. And then bring them to the brink of a great war, the climax, and then bam, introduce the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
So if you want to find out what happened in the rest of the story, please read the 700 verses of philosophy and then go forward. So that was the innovation. It was fantastic.
So now-
I see it like that.
I have, of course, the question that most people listening to this podcast or watching this video blog would be having. And that would be, is that first of all, we want to know about the Upanishads and the Vedas. For that, we need yet a totally different episode because it's a totally different field and thought process which has condensed and come down. And secondly, I want to know, I mean, of course, I have you, but I really need everyone out there to know where we can get your books.
Well, they're available in most bookstores,
Okay.
I think, and online, Amazon, Flipkart, all these places have them. But my favorite places to get them are little indie bookstores.
Oh, lovely. And I love these little things.
There are so many in India now. And there's one in Bangalore itself, which
Okay.
is one of my absolute favorites. It's called Funky Rainbow. And they have like an amazing collection
this
of
is-
only Indian children's books.
So this is so amazing because it's unreal. The book that I am carrying here of the Gita was given to me for my mother. And it says, "Happy birthday, Auntie Usha, my guardian angel, and Krishna through the entire journey of my dialysis with the flute. With much love and hugs, Muthu." Now, Muthu is the one with Funky Rainbow.
Yeah, she's one of the founders. Yeah.
Okay, so this is really amazing because this book, she felt that Amma's songs throughout her dialysis and throughout her toughest times was the Krishna for her. And then this book, because of that, became the, quite compelling for me. And I kept reading it. And I suppose that's how I ended up meeting you. So please remember, support Funky Rainbow. All the details will be there on this podcast. And yes, we're going to have Roopa Pai back very, very soon.
Thank you.
Maybe the halo will be making a sound at that time.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you ever so much.
Thanks, Anjali.
Thank you for watching India Diary Episode 1. Yes, talking about the Gita and how it became so simple for all of us to understand thanks to Roopa Pai. So like and subscribe and share so that we can talk about lots more extraordinary stories like how a painting changed my life, the painter's life, and gave rise to the second episode of India Diary with me, Anjali Uthup.